Hello John, today we're going to talk about Pat Hickey. We spoke about Pat in a previous video. I just want to see, maybe we might get an update on your views, but before that, there's a painting there up beside you, and maybe you can tell us about that. This is something that you painted a while back.
That's right, and it's a pastime I enjoy. It gets things out of your mind and you go into something else. I've done some in France, and I didn't do any in Rome. I didn't have a chance. That painting is in Clontarf in Dublin on a place called the Bull Wall. Now, there's no sign of bulls there, by the way, at the present time.
Okay.
No, there's no bulls in that, so people needn't worry if they go down there. They won't need a book. But it's called the Bull Wall. It must stand for something else. And then at the end of it, just towards the end of it, and there are seats on the way where a person that might be just getting a bit tired after a long trek can sit down for a bit. And at the end of it, there's a kind of a monument or a sculpture of some sort. And so people do walk down there, and it's a very healthy place because you're getting the sea breeze, but you're on the flat.
Okay. Right, so we'll move on to Pat Hickey. My first question is, have you changed your views on Pat Hickey since our last video?
I have not changed my views. The simple matter is that the arrest by Pat Hickey, the president of the Olympic Council of Ireland for over 30 years, did a marvellous job. You don't be president of an important body like that without performing your duties properly. So that's number one.
So you would say that Pat Hickey is innocent, would you?
I'd say, first of all, of course he is. He should have never been arrested whatsoever by the Brazilian police.
Has he done anything wrong?
Nothing whatsoever. He was there as the president of the Olympic Council of Ireland to give support and encouragement to the athletes taking part in that event. This arrest of Pat Hickey, a 71-year-old man with a heart condition, we now understand, but it's fair to say, with the pressure of the work he was doing, it's not exactly conducive to good health, because it would have a lot of stress, that occupation, I'm sure. He had to contend with various politicians who like to claim credit for all these matters.
So, I mean, considering his age, do you think he could have been treated better, maybe put into, maybe prison wasn't the place to put him?
It certainly was not the place to put him.
Particularly the type of prison.
He committed no crime, and he hasn't committed any crime. That is quite clear and obvious. Pat Hickey was arrested at 6 o'clock in the morning when he was having a shower or a bath in the next room to where his wife was. His wife was reported as being not knowing where he was. This probably is another fabrication. He wasn't in the room. What any woman, wife of a 71-year-old man, doing an important job representing this country at the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, what was she to think of with a crowd of armed police and a TV crew staring in the face looking for her husband at that hour of the morning? There's another way of inquiring. Pat Hickey wasn't a fugitive.
That's a very good point. It must have been actually very frightening. Do you think there was some other motivation around this? Could have been political or something else?
Well, if that's the way the Brazilian police treat their own citizens and treat citizens of another country like Ireland, politically motivated, I find it difficult to figure that out. What I will say and what I emphasise is that if the president of the Olympic Council of France, Spain, Germany, Britain, any other country, there would be a hue and cry from the government of that country to call in the ambassador from that country in Brazil to their wherever they happen to be located, and to also request an explanation from their Ministry for Justice. Now, this is an appalling way to treat any citizen, visiting citizen, especially of the calibre of the President of the Olympic Council of Ireland or the President of any other council in any other European country. It is the most foul deed that Brazilian police took.
Pat Hickey's family have since met the Irish Minister for Foreign Affairs. Do you think the Irish government could have done more sooner to help Pat Hickey?
Well, certainly they could. The first one that should have raised this issue was the Minister for Sport, Mr. Shane Ross. He was in Brazil, or in Rio de Janeiro. He wasn't there from the beginning, I understand. He was on holiday somewhere else. So he wasn't there, which was his duty to be there from the start of the Olympics to its conclusion, to support and give encouragement to the Irish competitors taking part there. Now, the first item he should have dealt with was the arrest of Mr. Kevin Mallon. When he was going about his business in his hotel, as far as I know, doing nothing that would necessitate the police apprehending him and putting him in a maximum security jail where there are murderers and God knows what sort of criminals located, and treating them as if they were common criminals of murderers and all the rest of it. And that was the first indication that the Brazilian police doesn't have the kind of rules and due process that other democratic countries have.
It's been covered in the Irish media and the newspapers. I think you've one or two articles there that you might want to show us.
The Irish media, by and large, has disgraced itself with the way they have seemed to find Mr. Pat Hickey guilty. Even Mr. Shane Ross, as soon as that man was arrested, ran back to this country and looked for an inquiry to take place, having a meeting with the Attorney General. Disgraceful behaviour. By the way, Mr. Flanagan, having a meeting, had indicated beforehand upon the media that he couldn't interfere in the affairs of another country. He wasn't asked to interfere, he was asked to sort of represent the interests and do something about the plight of Mr. Hickey and Mr. Mallon, Irish citizens. It's not right what he did. Now, the first one that I read was in support of this, was in the...
in support of your views now, or the...
Well, it would support like the sort of views that I have about this. One was in the Meat Chronicle, just very briefly, by a man called Paul Murphy, Viewpoint. And he says, the Brazilians can teach us little about justice. This is the headline. The country's president, Dilma Rousseff, is under suspension from her office and is facing an impeachment trial for alleged corruption. By the way, she hasn't had her head shaved yet, as Mr. Pat Hickey did. Now, she has been, she's going to be tried. Now, that's a separate matter. But Paul Murphy writes about Pat Hickey. He says, there is one small country we should all be grateful for in what I now officially name as real great. The fact that the government has opted for a non-statutory inquiry into what happened at the Olympic tickets. For a few agonising days, I feared we were heading into Mahon Tribunal country. That fiasco went on for something like 15 years, involving 917 days of public hearings and had the evidence from at least 400 witnesses. At least this inquiry into Reigate will, in the words of my local dentist, be quick and painless. We have had some awful spectacles in the past week or so, including the sight of an ageing man being confronted in his hotel room by Brazilian police, accompanied by a television crew who were alerted earlier and who didn't spare him the indignity of being shown both naked and in his dressing gown. and being examined by a doctor in the supposed privacy of his room. Now he goes on to support the views that I've expressed.
Okay.
The only other major media figure that has done that is Liam Collins in
Again, this is in defence of Pat Hickey.
it is in Liam Collins in the Irish Independent of Monday the 29th of August. Time we stopped treating Pat Hickey as public enemy number one. He lambasts the media, he lambasts the treatment of Mr. Hickey, and he points out that the GAA and other bodies allocate substantial amount of tickets for resale at quite expensive prices for the well-heeled and corporate affairs. So a lot of items like that go on in Western countries. Maybe Brazil is so chaste that they run things in such a manner that doesn't call anything into question. The fact of the matter is that Mr. Mallon, the first man to be Kevin Mallon, and now released on house arrest or bail or whatever you call it, he used to have some tag on his person, and likewise Mr. Hickey. Now this is disgraceful behaviour. Charge them and let the Brazilians stop pussyfooting around and making statements and showing Mr. Hickey's, which they did, his private papers for all to see. No respect for the kind of rule of law that is expected of any democratic country.
What kind of an outcome can you see for Pat Hickey and all the people involved?
Unless they have a very peculiar system of justice there, he'll be found innocent, and likewise so will Mr. Mallon. If they're not, one would have to call into question the Brazilian justice system. By the behaviour toward those two Irish citizens, there'd be scant tourists visiting that country. I wouldn't like to be there and perhaps have armed police arriving into my hotel room and accuse me of something or another that I might know nothing about, which is the situation here.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, John.
You're most welcome.